All right, 2 o'clock. So let's go ahead and start the Stump the Chump session. Panelists, you should be able to unmute yourselves, and if you need to show something on your screen, let me know, and I'll just make you the presenter. So I'll try and do this. I kind of slammed together the questions that we had outstanding here. Something that was sent in earlier was from Paula Coleman. Our company is new to Epicor. We went live in October of 2020. Our consultant set up our MRP as Sunday through Friday net change at 1 a.m. and Saturday regenerative at 1 a.m. For both types, they're running a finite scheduling during MRP calculation using production preparation buffer, run the multi-level pegging process. They have 3 MRP processes, 3 schedulers, and they're running it for all parts. When the net change runs, it doesn't produce many new suggestions. She runs an additional net change at 6:30 and suggestions jump from 30 to 90 with no activity happening in the system. Scheduler swears we're missing out, getting machines out the door by at least 5 days or more. To get around not needing suggestions, they changed the schedule to run the regenerative at 10 p.m. night and gave up on the net change. How often do other companies run net change versus regenerative? And would there be any other item that could cause the suggestions not to show on the new items? Tim or Christine, you guys might have the more experience there, or Jose. Hey, Jose made it.
Hello.
I think the first question is how far out is the dates? Is there any difference in the dates that was scheduled on the net change versus the regen?
Let me see if I can unmute Paula. Paula, you're unmuted if you want to speak up to this.
Like if you were to look in the logs of the MRP logs, it'll tell you there. If you don't know if the consultant set it up, you can see in the MRP log how far out the schedules or the MRP is running, the dates they're running to.
Paula, are you there? Looks like Paula's not able to unmute.
So I do have a theory on this.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The theory is that when whoever started the net change may not have set the date setting correct. So you have to do it so that it runs it as of quote unquote today instead of as of a date. When you launch the program and tell it you want to run it every day, they're basically on the date setting. You have to tell it, you have to say it's not a specific day. And so what I have seen happen over and over again was when somebody creates this something that runs every night, they forget to click that little checkbox that says run it as of today.
And that's a checkbox on the side where you can also choose the date, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's a checkbox. I think it's a combo box or something. So, but basically you have to tell it that you want it as of today or yesterday or next week or next, you have all these choices. And if you don't do that, then basically it runs it as of a specific date. And typically it's whatever date you ran it the first time. So it'll run it every day using the same date as the foundation date. So I started running it on the first. Say that again?
It's a scheduled start date. So there's 2 dates, right? There's the cutoff date. There's the cutoff date, and then there's the scheduled start date.
Yeah.
And if you check the dynamic checkbox, then you'll get that today, tomorrow.
Right. That's the checkbox I'm thinking of. I couldn't remember the name. So that's one theory, and then the other theory that I have seen, but this one probably is not the case if you're doing regenerative once a week, it doesn't matter as much. But there is another way of running net change, and that is you can run net change forever and never rerun a regenerative. Now, the way you do that is there's another program that's out there called calculate net change needed, I think it's what it's called, something along that line. And basically what it does is it looks at all the parts to find out if there's something that needs to have net change run for. That's probably not the case in this case because the story says that they run net change in the morning and they get more suggestions. So that tells me that something, that the net change that's scheduled to run at night has something set incorrectly, like the starting date.
And then Steve is saying MRP recalc. Would MRP recalc be needed? I think that's what you're talking about with the calculate net change.
Yes, that's the right one. It's one of those things I don't have the titles memorized. Yes, MRP recalc needed. What that does is it just looks at all your parts and says, hey, is there, if you have a time fence set up or some other thing that makes it so that now a new requirement has fallen within your time fence, then it would require a net change to be rerun on that part. Yeah. So.
Okay. Let me make sure nobody else had a hand raised on that. Hopefully that gets you your answer, Paula. Oh, wait, Mike, if you have time to regen MRP, is there any reasoning to run net change?
Old school. I'm going to go back to old school, 30 years ago. MRP, it took a long time to for the users to go through the MRP report. And I'm going to, back in the old days that we used to run MRP, then it would generate a big pile of paper that was 2 feet thick, and then purchasing would have to go through that pile of paper. Well, if you did another regen, you had to go and basically reprint the report. Net change only had a report for what changed. The same kind of thing can happen electronically. If you run a full regen, then purchasing can pull up the buyer's workbench and they can check off things that they go, yeah, I've looked at this. And that's actually a feature in there. I've looked at this suggestion, but I don't want to do it right now. That will stay there until the next regen. But if you mark it as, yes, I've looked at it, I don't want to generate the PO, and then you run full regen tonight, that'll go away and it'll tell you to look at it again. So there is some reason for doing a net change versus a full regen, but most companies don't operate that way. And most just say, hey, do a full regen. And if you have time, it's no big deal because you're probably going to take everything that you need to buy tomorrow and buy it.
Okay. Let's go to our next question here from Graham Ross. I'd like to have default report styles by site or maybe other criteria. What would the group suggest to build a BPM which would override the default from the company code? I'd prefer a BPM rather than a customization so I could extend this technique to other reports as well as migrate to Kinetic without redeveloping.
All right, today you only have report style by company.
Right.
Default report style by company, right?
Yes.
I haven't checked. What version are you on? In 700, or not 700, in 21, you can do BPMs on reports and processes. So you might be able to take advantage of something like that in there.
Yep.
But it depends on the version you're in. I'm trying to see, because I know that when you open a report screen, for example, it has to go get the style sheets, or not the style, the report styles. And I believe that it does make a call to the server on that, but I think you may have to be on 21 to be able to put a BPM on that process.
Okay. And it doesn't look like Graham's still online, so we'll leave that there it is. Gerardo Lopez, how are other people handling the conversion of advanced classic screen customizations to work with Kinetic? We have many customizations that are like whole applications within an Epicor screen with additional functionality such as sending emails, manipulating files, method calls, triggering reports, so on. Much of this is not possible with Application Studio, so how should we approach rewriting these to work with Kinetic?
What we've been trying to look at is basically you want to take any functionality that you thought you needed to write custom code for and move it to the server. Epicor function is the easiest approach to do that. But frankly, we're running into things, we haven't run into anything, into many things that you can't really do with Application Studio. It does take a little bit of finagling and kind of, lacing up the right events. But for the most part, you should be able to do almost anything from App Studio. Now, things like sending emails, that should be server-side function anyway. That should have never really been a customization. So if you want to send an email, the best thing to do is, wire up an Epicor function and have it send the email for you. Now, manipulating files, again, there would have to be a very specific situation in which you need to do that. But for the most part, again, that's going to be a server-side functionality. That might be a little tricky to do with App Studio, just because getting files from the local machine may prove difficult. But you can, Epicor does have a file upload business object, so you could technically with App Studio select a file, upload it to the server, then do the processing on the server side in a function, and then respond with that. But you basically have to change your mindset and think of the customizations on the UI as simply visual changes, and move all your logic to the server side.
And I wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said. I had a customer that started down the line of doing a bunch of business logic in sales order entry. And this was in the old, this before Kinetic, before the new UI. And they had modified in their win forms all sorts of business logic, all sorts of validation. They did not do it with BPMs. And then they decided to connect Epicor Commerce Connect, which needed to do the same logic. And guess what? Epicor Commerce Connect drops in sales orders, but it doesn't use the user interface to drop orders in. And so they all of a sudden realized that they were going to have to go and rewrite all that logic as their interface for ECC. And then they started using Epicor Quotes, which also create sales orders without touching the user interface. So we ended up having to move all that logic out of the UI and move it into BPMs, because that is the right place to do it. Anything that is a business logic that needs to go and do a validation and make sure that you've done something right, or that updates data in a different table or sets commissions or whatever, needs to be done as a BPM, not in the user interface. And let the user interface be a user interface all by itself. And that's just my take home on that. It was quite big project to take all that logic out of their user interface in the win form and move it to BPMs. But once we did that, now all of a sudden they can upgrade to Kinetic, because Kinetic has it's just a user interface now.
Gerardo, I've got you unmuted if you want to add anything to that. If you want to unmute yourself, and then you should be able to be heard.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, can hear you now.
Okay. This is actually Carl, Gerardo's colleague. So yeah, we use a lot of Epicor screen customizations as kind of workflows. And so somebody will enter some data, and then decisions will be made by the code, and then maybe an email will go out to different people, and that email will include an attachment with a sysconfig file that will allow those recipients of that email to go directly to that Epicor record. Now, all that works with the classic UI, but I don't think much of that will work with Kinetic.
Yeah, it won't work the same way. But I would say you should be able to do the same type of thing with BPMs. You'll just have to do it differently.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe we could take some of these workflows and applications that are really, a lot of them don't have all that much to do with Epicor. They're almost applications on their own. We may be able to take some of them and build, say, like a web app to handle logic that doesn't have anything to do with Epicor and different data entry and that sort of stuff. And then when we do need to interact with Epicor, we use REST functionality to pull in data or to write data. And we may be able to rewrite some of these using a web app and REST kind of hybrid model. What do you think of that?
While I don't recommend you do that with all your customizations because it's going to be really hard to maintain, one thing I did want to mention is that Epicor does have the embedded iframe functionality in App Studio. And it's a widget in App Studio that allows you to basically embed a web application inside of Epicor. And one of the really neat features it has is that you have the ability to make that a publishing iframe. So you could actually embed an application, a web application, inside your Epicor screen, and then publish to your application the current Epicor credentials and session and pass that over to your application. So you can technically, you don't have to maintain a separate session or a separate login directly in your application, but rather you would receive that directly from the iframe into your separate applet, and then you can turn around and do REST calls to get the Epicor information. So that's a good solution for some of these advanced customizations you're mentioning, but I would behoove you to give a shot and trying to just recreate those customizations in a way that the logic is all server side as much as possible. Again, sending emails and things like that, you can do all that from an Epicor function very trivially. So I would say, reconsider trying to do that as much as you can. But if there's something you absolutely cannot do on the server side, then an embedded iframe with consuming the Epicor session might be your best bet.
Okay, that's very interesting. I'll check that out. A follow-up question: is there a way to send somebody a link to a record, to an Epicor or to a Kinetic screen, to a specific record?
I don't know the answer to that. I know you can send them to us
with sysconfig files, but I wonder if there's a alternative to that now.
Well, now it's via a web browser. So it's a web browser, and I believe you can because the right click does that. So it's a matter of figuring out what the web address is for it.
Right.
Okay.
So you can right click on a part in Epicor and say open with part advisor, and it does. It opens the part advisor and opens the right part number. So that being the case, it's passing over the data at once.
So for that, what you might want to look at is using the web instance of Kinetic.
Right.
And then when you do the right click open with, have your developer tools open, because that'll tell you the URL and you can probably figure it out from there.
Okay, sure.
I believe there's nothing in App Studio yet that lets you do it though. That's coming up. But yeah, the mechanism is built in. There's just no way in App Studio to make it happen right now.
All right, anything else, Gerardo?
No, that's a lot to think about. I'm gonna have to check out some of those options. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you could mute yourself, we'll move on to the next one. Samantha Harding, will Epicor Cloud ever function with MatTech seamlessly as advertised? We've not been able to get these to talk to each other at all. Tim, they should talk together, shouldn't they? I thought that was...
That's the plan, yes. There are some challenges going on right now with MatTech.
Okay.
And they're working on that.
Let me see if I can find Samantha in here. Samantha, there you are. Samantha, if you wanted to speak to that. Whoops, wait a minute. You should be unmuted now, Samantha, if you want to talk.
Hey there. I don't have a ton of information. I'm the only person from my company in on this meeting right now, but I do know that we've been on the cloud since we started with Epicor, which was January of 2019, and we brought manufacturing in-house soon after, and we were sold MatTech a little over a year ago, and we've tried every possible thing that we've been asked to do, and we still can't get it to work at all.
Have you talked to your CAM about this also?
Yes.
And tech support?
Yep.
Could
No,
you send
Everybody's
me
totally involved.
yeah, could you send me an email on that specifically, Samantha?
Which, I'm sorry, who's speaking? What's your email?
This is Tim Shoemaker. It's TSHOEMAKER at epicor.com.
Sure.
Just send it to me if you've got a service call number and that type of thing, so that I can punch this up line and see if we can.
Yeah, I'll get more information from the other people on my team that know a little bit more than me, and I'll definitely get you an email over.
Because yeah.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate you helping her out.
So do I.
Okay, let's go on to Russell, and I'm not even going to try your last name because I'll butcher it. I'm sorry. Is there a BAQ to find menu IDs that you have enabled and licensed? When doing an upgrade, what's the best way to find the new screens to set security on those? Russell, I'll try and find you and unmute you here.
That's a great question, and the answer is no. I tried to write a BAQ that would show menu IDs that were licensed, and there isn't a way to do that.
Well,
The licensing, I think it's due to the fact that they're trying to secure how licensing works. Licensing is a secret process that's sitting out there, and you have to actually run the process to find out if it's licensed. And so when you say to run this, it goes through the licensing question, and it goes, nope, sorry, you're not licensed for that. And you can't run a process from a BAQ. It's not a data lookup.
So no easy answer for you, Russell, sorry. Sharon Pulsifer, in moving to Kinetic, what would be deciding factors on when to convert and when to re-implement?
What version are you on?
I'm looking to see if we have Sharon in here. It doesn't look like she's still online. So I'm not certain what version she's in.
Right. Pretty much anybody that's on, if they're staying on-prem, they can just upgrade. And as long as they're not changing their company structure, their site structure, it's easy. But if they're moving to cloud, then there's the whole, there is a export process. You use the analyze tool and export, and then we import it into the cloud. And there is a little bit of a re-implementation, but then you basically have to decide, okay, when does the amount of changes that you're making as a company make you decide, wow, we should just start over and export only our master data, our parts and our customers and suppliers and orders and POs, and return it on. But that's rare that people start over like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're already on 10, you probably wouldn't look at restarting over. If you're on an earlier version, you may want to, just because there are some things that now is a good time to look at how you're doing some of your system processes. And if you want to make changes to those, that may behoove you to do a re-implementation. For example, I know Mark Olbrands, when he upgraded to 10, he took that as an opportunity to get rid of some dead for lack of a better term, some dead customers they hadn't done business with, and so also some suppliers. So they used it as a chance to clean up the system. And also from using the system, they had learned some things along the way. You know, hey, we thought we were going to do things this way, but as you use it, you figure out, oh, wait, there's a better way to do it. So they were getting rid of some of that old archaic data that was just hanging around. So that's why they did some re-implementation, was just to do cleanups like that and make things a little bit better in the system. But if you're on 10 already, I would say, unless you've got something like that that you want to clean up and get rid of old things, or you've changed processes massively, it should be a fairly straightforward upgrade.
And even 9, you know, if you're on 9 or 8, we have the Cirrus program where you can install the analyzer, which will tell you where all your customizations are, how many there are. And as part of the Cirrus program, if you decide to upgrade through that, basically you take your database, it packages it, it sends it to a cloud server where it analyzes it and shows you all your customizations. You can choose which ones you want to keep and which ones you don't want to keep. And then it basically upgrades those and creates a new version of your software at the upgraded state. So, I mean, it doesn't fix everything. So if you have some BPMs that need to be rewritten because they were in ABL and now they need to be in C#, you're gonna have to touch those. But you know, customers can upgrade from Vantage 8 all the way straight up to Kinetic through the Cirrus program. And if you're interested in that, talk to your CAM.
All right, back to Russell again. This was a question that was from the Application Studio presentation. Under System Setup, Security Maintenance, Field Security Maintenance, go into table part, field part num. He was asking, do you have something in the source text item on the screen? And what is it talking about? Dylan, is that something you can check into?
I'm looking. I didn't even know that existed. I don't really use field security maintenance, by the way, just because I know once you start applying security to fields, it can slow down your system sometimes, because then it has to, every time anyone makes a change in that table, it has to verify, oh, do they have permission every single time. But the source text on the part table. I actually, which field is that again? The part number field?
Part num, do you have something in the source text item on the screen?
I actually do, but I don't understand it. Tom Jones is a classic English novel that captures.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like there might have been a hiccup in some help text there. Okay, so I don't think it means anything, Russell. I think it's a mistake. You might want to report that to support and have that get corrected in a later version. Okay, from Brad Descharm at Forest City. Is there a way to run 2 jobs on 1 machine at a time? And Brad, I'll unmute you here in case you want to ask more on that. I think this was, he had asked this during Tim, your scheduling presentation.
Yep. So the answer is yes, but it's a it's a kind of an odd yes. You can do what's called job batching. So you can take the 2 jobs and batch them together for that operation. And when you do that, it creates a 3rd job that is your batched job that all the parts reside on. And then when you're done with that, depending on how you batched it, because there's different ways to batch. You can forward batch, you can backwards batch. So you could say from if you've got 10 operations, you could say starting at operation 5, we're going to batch the rest of the job, and it takes the entire job and it merges multiple jobs together and says, okay, operations 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 are all batched together. Or you can say backwards batch, and that means you're going to batch 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 together, and then it splits back out into their separate jobs. The downfall of batching, I'm just throwing the warning on it, is that, there's no way around it, it's just a problem with batching, is it has to decide, it uses the first job that you selected when you're creating your batch to decide what the standard is for that operation. And so if the first one happens to only take 1 minute per part, but the second job takes 5 minutes per part, sorry, they all get 1 minute per part, because that's the batch foundation, is the first job that you included in the batch. But yes, you can do batching. And then once you have a batch, it creates a job number that is, if your first job was 1, 2, 3, 4, it creates a job 1, 2, 3, 4-1, I believe it is, which is the batch job number. And they log into that instead of into the main job.
Let me know if that doesn't answer your question, Brad. He said he doesn't have a mic, so I'll give him a few seconds to type in case there's a further question, or if all is okay.
And by the way, if somebody is trying to find out, well, where do you do job batching? You do that in the resource scheduling board, actually. You pull up the resource scheduling board, and on the last tab of the resource scheduling board, there is a job batching process. So you find everything that's going to this one resource and say, I want to take these, jobs and batch them into that one resource. It's very common to be done in jobs where you have, if you're a shelving manufacturer and you have all these parts and they all have to be painted the same color, you want to merge them so you can do the paint operation all at once. So that's how I've used it.
Excellent. Christine and Caleb from Ag Leader, also in scheduling, why is it so important to reschedule firm jobs with dates in the past?
So I'm assuming the question is, why would I need to if it's a firm job and it has dates in the past? So if I have a job that was, that we firmed up, and then we didn't finish things on time, and now I've got operations 10, 20, and 30 were all supposed to be finished yesterday. That means today they're still scheduled to finish yesterday, which means they are still consuming resources on yesterday's calendar. They're not consuming the resources on today's calendar, and yet today is going to be the day they're going to get their work done. Well, what happens is, if there wasn't anything scheduled to be done on those resources today, the system thinks that this time today is available for additional work. So the system looks at today and it says, hey, is there anything scheduled on the calendar today? No, there isn't. Okay, cool. Let's schedule this new job to be processed today. And what you just did was you just guaranteed you're not going to be on time for that job because you're already working on yesterday's work today. Does that make sense? But basically, it's you need to push everything that you didn't get finished yesterday needs to be rescheduled to today if you're going to do finite scheduling. That's in reality if you're going to do finite scheduling.
Another piece of that probably I should have put in there is because of the material constraints that's around the world right now, because of COVID, we have a lot of parts that aren't coming in on time, but manufacturing may have firmed up the jobs. And so we can have jobs that may not even have been started, but it was firmed up from months ago. Yeah. And so we're trying to explain to them why we need to move them, because it also helps not just for scheduling, but also for purchasing when it comes to demand. And so
if you know you're not going to get that material for another 2 months, you should just definitely reschedule the start date, and that will also relieve the material, all the other materials that are on that job as well, because you don't need all those materials for another 2 months.
Correct.
I'm
Does that
a
get you
realist when I'm a realist when it comes to scheduling. I want the system to tell me when do I need that stuff. And if I don't need it for 2 months, I don't need to buy it. I don't need to store it. I don't need it. I can use it for other things. But if I'm lying to the computer that says I'm going to consume it yesterday, the system is going to do everything it can to make sure I have all the materials in by yesterday. And it's going to tell me to reschedule POs to come in yesterday, which I know that's not going to happen. But
Right. To me, it introduces a lot of garbage in the system of people having to look for stuff they don't need. And I just wanted to hear it from, we wanted to hear it from someone else.
Or how about this? And this is I yell at production people and sales people. Sales are the worst ones. They say, well, we can't reschedule that job because then we don't know how late we are. And I cringe because I go, okay, but now you can't tell, I can't tell you when it's going to be done either. I need to reschedule it with real information so that I can tell you really when it's going to be really done. And then you should also change your sales order to have a scheduled ship date for when you're really going to ship it. Because then MRP stops hitting me over the head every day telling me to reschedule my job. Because if I don't reschedule my sales orders win, and it will always go, ooh, look, this sales order was scheduled to be shipped yesterday. Your job should be finished yesterday. You should have purchased this stuff 6 months ago. And it'll beat you over the head until you tell it a real schedule, because it's very matter of fact.
One of the other excuses or reasons that we haven't seen this happen is that they have too many in the past and there's not enough time and resources to change the scheduling.
Like manpower, you mean?
Is there a process that would do it automatically?
Yeah, global
that we can
rescheduling.
flag?
Yeah, you can run global rescheduling and tell it to reschedule everything.
Okay.
Now, be careful. I mean, I'm going to tell you that that's there, and you do that, and then somebody goes, "Why did it reschedule all my jobs? Now I don't know which one to work on." And so because if your process right now is to work on the oldest job first, and you've got, and all your jobs are past due, it could cause you a problem because you don't know which one is the oldest one.
Well, the lock on the job will take care of that, right? Wouldn't reschedule it if there's a lock on the job.
Correct. But now I still say that's a problem too, because you still have past due scheduled jobs from yesterday. So it's a mess when you have lots of stuff past due. It makes it so that the system cannot give you good advice. And to show you the ridiculousness of this, I mean, I worked in an environment this was back in 1988, when I was working at a company, and their MRP system, the planning department, which I'm being nice when I call them the planning department, decided that they needed MRP just to tell them everything they needed to buy. So they put a 999-day lead time on everything. So now when you put in a sales order, it told you everything was 3 years late, basically. And then it basically combined everything, said buy everything now. And so everything you did, and it didn't matter when the order was due, it told you to buy everything today. Well, it told you to buy everything 3 years ago. And then they would just buy everything. Well, it just inflates inventory. You're buying 3 years worth of inventory. Plus you were buying material you didn't need for 3 more years also. And we had these long-term contracts that went out 5 years. Well, we were buying inventory we didn't need for 3 more years because their MRP told them that everything took 999 days to do. So that's the insane extreme that people can go to just really screw up a system and cause your inventory turns go down to get horrible. And you've just raised how much inventory you're going to store on hand all the time by having incorrect data. And lead times is part of the three-legged stool that I always say. You have to have correct bills of materials, correct quantities, correct quantity on hands, and correct schedules.
And we've got a couple follow-on questions for y'all. So how should that rescheduling of firm jobs be done properly?
I could even argue that those firm jobs, which you haven't done work on, it might be a good idea just to delete the firm jobs and let MRP recreate them. I mean, that would be actually, if the unless there's purchase direct items on it, you could go into those. If you deleted those firm jobs and recreated the let MRP recreate them as unfirm jobs, if those materials were marked as constrained materials, it would just push out the start date of the jobs automatically for you. Try
Okay.
it with one of the jobs. I mean, it's one of those things where you could try and see what happens, but that might be an easy fix.
Does the rescheduling firm job issue only apply to finite scheduling or also happen for infinite scheduling?
Well, it's past works that's scheduled in the past is always deceiving. It's not as big of a problem in an infinite world, because it only matters when you're trying to talk about a finite scheduling. If you do finite scheduling and have scheduling in the past, your finite scheduling is just it's not going to work. Finite scheduling does not work with work scheduled in the past. Again, the illustration is, if I've got on this one, I've got one CNC machine, and if I am 40 hours past due right now on that machine, I've got 40 hours of work scheduled into the past. That means that everything that I've got in the future is 40 hours late also. And so what's going to happen is I get a new sales order comes in, and the system doesn't take into account those 40 hours of late time. It looks for open windows and says, hey, where's the first open hour I can schedule this job? Oh, here's an open hour. It's tomorrow. And it drops the job into tomorrow's date. It's not going to happen tomorrow because you're 40 hours past due. It's not going to happen for at least 40 hours into the future. But it doesn't know that because it sees an open window in the schedule. It's like, you look at your Outlook calendar, it's looking for an open slot in the Outlook calendar and it's dropping the job into it. That it doesn't know that you went on vacation last week and all your meetings that you were supposed to go to last week, all are going to be scheduled for this week, and you're just shoving everything out in the future. So.
Excellent. From Scott Lepley, also on scheduling. We've been using, this may even be related to this, we have been using finite scheduling, but our production manager wants to switch to infinite. I found that after turning off finite capacity and resource setups, simply unengineering the jobs and rerunning MRP did not reschedule all jobs. It was necessary to use the remove from schedule function to remove resource time used records, but now want to do that on a mass scale. Tim suggested trying to run the global reschedule feature, but that did not work. Can we simply delete the resource time used records via direct SQL deletion?
Well, I'm never going to answer that question yes on the last one, so sorry. I would say remove from schedule would be the best way to do it. I think it's because you're changing your resources from finite to infinite, that there are certain flags that are created in the job, and it probably has a finite flag turned on the job because it was finite at the time you created it. So I'd never have really thought about how that would really work.
Is there any way to do that on several items at the same time? Or you just have to do it?
You'd create an Epicor function that would go select all those jobs and then call that process, and that would take some advanced programming. But yeah, you could do that. But I don't think that there's a fast way of doing this.
Okay. Scott, I'll go ahead and unmute you just in case I didn't answer your question. Give me a second. There you are. You should be able to unmute yourself if you want to, Scott.
Okay, I did.
All right.
So-
Yeah, if there's no way to do that on a mass scale,
Yeah.
then
Yeah,
it's just
I
going to
don't
be
think
a
so.
tedious process to do all those jobs. And we're talking about hundreds of jobs, one by one.
That sounds like a good summer job for somebody's son or daughter to come in and
Mm,
spend a couple hours doing it.
yeah, or someone else doing it in the evening.
Yeah.
Yours truly.
Yeah, I'm sometimes a brute force method. Well, a lot of times I'm brute force method. I just look at something like that and I go, well, it could take me 5 hours to write the program, or I could spend the next 2 hours and just do it. And I'm a programmer. So the other thing I wanted to say about your statement here is that I am a firm believer in infinite scheduling. I would, in most cases, I like environments where we choose to do infinite scheduling, and then we look at the resource load and see how many hours we've loaded, and then we as human beings get to make some decisions about what we're going to run when and what things get pushed out and pulled in. And that's
Right.
just because in many environments, your sales department is not typically overselling your capacity, or maybe they're hitting your limit. You need to, as a human being, you can look at customer A and customer B and go, man, this one's for Honeywell and this one's for John Doe. Honeywell is a much more important customer to me. I'm going to schedule the Honeywell one to come in on time.
Sure. And that's exactly, to your point, that's exactly what the production manager is thinking, that he would just like to make those decisions on the scheduling of the resources as he sees fit. The reason we have gone with Finite in the first place when we went live was because we were trying to accomplish capable to promise.
Yep.
As far as I know, the only way you can really do that is with finite capacity.
Yeah, but the other thing is that, and I didn't say this in my presentation, but when we say finite versus not finite or infinite, that doesn't mean it's a all or nothing. So I've seen many companies implement finite scheduling on 1 or 2 resources. So they've got a laser cutting machine or a plasma machine that sits there and they're running that thing 24/7. And their engineers have already calculated the exact amount of time that it takes to manufacture the part. That machine is their finite capacity. They can run their drill presses many more hours than the 3 or 4 hours a day that they're running their drill presses. So the drill press is not something we need to finitely worry about. And even their people are not something we have to worry about, because their people, the assemblers on one assembly line can move over to the other assembly line as needed. You have a little bit more flexibility. So what you need to know is, well, how many hours of assembly work do we have? How many hours of machine shop work do we have? So you know how to staff it. But when it comes to that machine, or maybe that special person that is the TIG welder, that you only have one of them, and they're only going to work 8 hours or maybe 10 hours a day, then at that point, that's when you need to finitely schedule them. Otherwise, let the system just tell you, tomorrow you have 13 hours worth of work. The next day you only have 7. Okay, well, you're going to flex it. Let your shop supervisor flex it a little bit. But that's my theory.
Okay.
And I'm sticking with it.
All right, thank you.
All right. Scott Tucker, on scheduling crew size, can you override the specified crew size on a specific job if the complexity of the job increases or reduce the required crew size on that scheduling block?
Yes, you can. But it will not change the standard cost. It will change the estimated cost. But you can do that. Not a problem.
Does that answer your question, Scott? You're unmuted if you want to pipe in there.
Just remember that crew sizes all about defining what the cost is going to be. It has nothing to do with the number of resources that are going to go on it. So if you're trying to do finite scheduling of resources, crew size is not the way to do it. To do finite scheduling of resources themselves, you have to specify that you need 2 resources.
Okay.
Which means you have to add 2 resources to the operation, not just say, I need 2 crew. It's kind of an interesting problem that I didn't go into. So,
Casey, on scheduling, when moving your schedule bar to reschedule, does that reschedule all operations related to it, like cut, bend, machine, etc.?
it depends on which one you drag. So I was dragging it by the top bar, and then when you did that, it asks you, do you want to do all operations or all subsequent operations or the entire job or all related jobs? So it depends on what option you choose when you do that move. You can just drag around one operation at a time if you want. I was doing the top bar, so.
Okay. Scott, again, on scheduling, if you specify the real long lead times for difficult to obtain parts, do you really need to flag those parts as constrained? Is setting constrained somewhat like setting a safety stock quantity?
The answer is, if you want it to constrain your job, yes, you do. Because if you have a purchased item that has a 365-day lead time, and then but the job is only 1 week to manufacture it, sales comes and sells it and says, yeah, we want to ship this in 2 weeks. It'll create a job and it'll schedule the job, and then it'll tell you, wow, you're late on this purchase order. But it won't force the job. But if you tell it that it's a constrained material, it will literally try to schedule the job for 2 weeks out, and then it'll realize that you can't even start this job for a year, and so it will schedule to start a year from now, and it'll be available 2 weeks after.
Okay.
That's if you don't have any on hand. If you have some on hand, it of course will allow you to schedule the job to start today.
We're doing good on scheduling here. From Sharon, my company may never configure the scheduling data to work correctly. We schedule in Excel. We would like to import operation start dates via DMT. Whenever we do, Epicor still backwards schedules and doesn't use the values entered with the DMT. Will that change in Kinetic?
Nope, that's the way it works.
Okay. Sorry, Sharon.
I get what you're trying to do, but I would suggest having somebody actually learn how to do the scheduling in Epicor. I mean, I've gone through several really complex organizations where they were doing it with Excel, and we found out what they were doing, and we figured out how to make the schedule work correctly for them. And they had some pretty interesting, gnarly problems that we had to figure out, and why they were doing it the way they were doing it. Paint lines are interesting when you have a paint line and you're trying to batch jobs that get together, and it's the backward scheduling of a 30 line item sales order, which has 30 jobs, and they all have to finish the same day because they're all going to be painted the same day. It just becomes a really interesting, gnarly problem. We had to do it with some dashboards. We had to create dashboards that pulled up the whole sales orders job, all the jobs on one sales order, and allowed us to set the finish date on all those jobs to be the same thing. And then it scheduled them all backwards, and then allowed us to batch them from there. So, but it was a special dashboard.
From Michael Cromer, will minimize WIP also work for MRP jobs that feed into each other?
Yes, but MRP jobs are interesting. There is a, man, I got to show it to you now. Now I can't just talk about it because I can't explain it. Can I share my screen?
Yes, give me just a second. We'll make you presenter. There you go, Tim.
Man, I sure hope that I hope I remember how to do this in Kinetic. You can see my my Epicor screen now with the job.
Yes, sir.
So, oh, that's not a job, that's a part. Let me go into job. So there is a scheduling priority code. This gets tricky, sorry. Where is the nice little thing? Scheduling priority code. See this, and it says normal. If I right click in this, let's see if this has been kineticized. I don't even know if this particular field has been. That's not a good sign. There we go. So scheduling priority codes are an interesting thing because inside of scheduling priority code, and we look at normal, there is a checkbox for minimize WIP. So if the job that you are, if MRP creates a job and that job has a normal, when it creates a job, it will create it with a normal scheduling code. It looks to here to find out how it should schedule your normal jobs. So if you have gone into this scheduling priority code and changed normal to be, no, I don't want to schedule backwards, I want to schedule forwards, and I want to minimize WIP, then yeah, it will do that. So you can choose by looking at the schedule priority code how it's going to schedule for all new MRP jobs.
Excellent.
That was probably something new for a bunch of people.
Let's see if I
And
can. Go ahead.
By the way, we have a whole bunch of different scheduling priority codes. So that did not work the way I was expecting it to work. Interesting. I might have to report that. So you'll notice that there's all these different scheduling priority codes. In the job, you can choose which scheduling priority code you want to have the job working under. And these different scheduling priority codes will change the way that jobs are scheduled. And when you do global rescheduling, it also chooses a priority as to which jobs get scheduled before which others, because so that's a whole nother, that's why I say finite scheduling and global rescheduling and all of that is a very advanced topic because you have to understand a lot of this other work.
Can you apply that priority code to specific parts or product groups?
I believe the only way you can do that is at the sales order level is when you can set the priority code, if I'm remembering correctly, or at the job level. I don't think there is a way to do it by part class. There is a default. So you can see this one normal is called default. I believe at the sales order level, you can say, no, this is a high priority, and then it will do that. But that has to be if it's a make direct type sales order. I have seen people write a BPM that will flip the flag and change the scheduling priority code on the job to be something else. So.
All right. Let me flip back to my screen here. Or wait, do you have more to?
You're still trying to stump me on these things. I was just gonna. So yep. We're talking about this field here that nobody ever pays any attention to, and you know it's this one here. And well, what's scheduling? Well, that immediate forward schedule. When you choose that, then what happens is when you choose the schedule option in the menu, job scheduling, it will already be set up to be. Now it's making me a liar. It should have automatically selected that and should have, that's what it should have done, but it did not do that. So the default isn't setting. But that's basically what MRP will do when it schedules this job. it will use the immediate versus low or high or normal. So, but if you want to go in and change your normal scheduling mode, you can do that.
Fred, this is Scott. Could I jump in for just a moment?
Sure.
You may have my follow-up question from earlier coming up soon, but I asked a question, Tim, about getting back to Christine and Caleb's question. If they're having trouble with those past due jobs and getting the scheduler to consider them, could this scheduling priority be used to try to facilitate that, where they could update those past due jobs with a higher priority value and then let the scheduler be able to see them as being the most important? Would that help him?
I think his problem was that he wanted to get them off of the finite scheduling. Unless you're thinking of a different conversation, and he had to touch every single one of them. And he was hoping to.
A different.
Oh, is that a different? Am I thinking of a different subject?
Yeah, I think our biggest issue is the sheer number of jobs that are out there that are in past due that are our supervisors don't want to touch because there's a lot of them, and I don't think they understand the importance of moving those forward when they're not ready to work on them. So we kind of wanted to hear from Epicor themselves.
So to me, the importance is, if my required by date is sitting back, in April, April Fools, and I reschedule this and I say, yeah, forward schedule this, that tells me when it's going to happen. And I worked in production control for a bunch of years. And the fact is that I'm going to forward schedule this from today. It's going to tell me when I can have it. That allows me to just tell sales, well, look at the date that the job is scheduled. That's when it's going to be out.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just gave me a warning. Hey, warning, your due date, this is the date it's going to come out, is 9/3. We needed it 4/1. We're going to miss the due date. But now sales knows something. Now they can say, oh, wow, you're not going to get that out till 9/3. I really needed it by 4/1. Well, sorry, you're not going to have it by April 1st. Sorry, it's not going to happen. But this is when it's scheduled to come out. And it's realistic. Now sales can negotiate with me and say, hey, is there anything you can do to expedite that? And we can go into the job and see if we can shorten some lead time down. We can add scheduling blocks to it and say, well, let's go add, instead of one scheduling block, let's do 2 or 3 scheduling blocks. That will shorten the duration. So that's where negotiating comes in and allows us to pull in things, but now we can actually see what's going to happen rather than just leaving the schedule back on April 1st and going, well, we would have liked to have had it April 1st. All a dream. And then once we commit to it, then sales goes in my ideal world, sales goes in and changes their schedule ship date to what you are currently planning on shipping it. And now MRP stops telling us to reschedule this job every day. Because right now, if my sales order said April 1st and my job says, here's the due date, it's going to tell me every day that this job needs to be rescheduled.
Can that magically be done?
What? Automatically update the sales order?
Yeah. I mean, because it wouldn't be a direct link, but obviously some of these are
if it's make direct. Yeah. If it's make direct, it can be. People tend to not like that, but there is this checkbox right here that says synchronize required by date with demand links. So yes, you can, but I'm going to just warn you that this is it's just an odd way. The way it works is odd, and it also requires make direct. And if it's make the stock and you're floating everything from stock, it's there is no direct link between the sales order and the inventory. So at that point, it becomes a negotiation of how fast you're going to make this stuff, and telling sales to repromise the sales order. And they can cry every day that, well, but the customer wants it. And I'm sorry. Let's tell them the real facts. And now this is our promise date, and that's what we're going to do. Now, if we miss that promise date, I'm going to, you can yell at me all day long. I'm wrong, but I missed it. Like I said, I'm a realist. I did production scheduling for a long time, and I had to come up with a date, and I had to deal with sales telling me, but they have to have it next week. You're not going to get it next week. It's not going to happen. It has to sit in the oven for 3 weeks. Sorry, it can't get done faster.
All right. I'll get back onto the critter here. Where'd my screen go? There we go.
Sorry if I'm too black and white on some of these things. I'm just.
Actually, Tim, it's very refreshing that you are black and white, because that's what we, in my opinion, that's what we need to hear so that we can tell that same black and white, or we can borrow you to come tell our people that black and white scenario.
There's a customer that it's a big customer. They were at Insights this last couple months ago, and they came to me and go, we were having this discussion, and the last time you were here, you told us that history doesn't exist, and we went back and we told people, and finally they said, we are now scheduling everything in the future, and nothing gets scheduled in the past anymore. And she said, it's so amazing because now we know when everything is needed. Right. It's like this goes back to my continual phrase. You lie to the computer, it lies back. If you tell it that you can have the inventory started 3 weeks ago and you can do this 3 weeks ago, it will tell you that you can have it finished today.
I see Ben Tikus is saying the same thing I'm thinking. We'd love to have you come tell our sales and production team this. I could not agree more, because sometimes Caleb and I, or Ben or whoever, we can all tell our people that, but they need to hear it. Same thing you tell them, we tell them, but they'll listen to you and not to us sometimes.
It's just, unfortunately. Yeah, sorry. Need a consultant to come in there and be hard-nosed about it. And so.
Yeah. No, it's very refreshing.
Okay, another item from Scott. The vast majority of our bombs and jobs are single level. What's the easiest way to find the exceptions to that? Could just write a BAQ to find that, couldn't you?
Write a BAQ. Here's how to do it. Write a BAQ that looks at the field called low level code in the part master. There's a field called low level code, and anything that has a low level code greater than 1 is at least 2 levels deep into a bill of material.
Okay. So I should run the recalculate low level codes first and then run that BAQ.
You shouldn't have to recalculate, because the system's pretty clean about the low level codes, unless you have had some data corruption or something. The system automatically maintains low level codes. So in reality, if you say, show me all the low level codes of 0, you know that those are all either manufactured, top level manufactured items, or they are purchased items that are not in a manufactured item. They're top levels. Anything with a 1 in the low level code is at least 1 level down in a bill of material. If it's a make and a 1, you know that it has components. That means it's 2 levels down. If it's a make and a level 2, you know that it's 2 levels down and it's 3 levels deep. So it's that kind of thing. So I would search for anything that has a make, that is marked as a make item, that is a 1 or greater, and those are those deeper bills.
Okay, good enough. Thank you very much.
That's an old MRP question. That's a old school MRP stuff.
And we do have a few other questions in the questions window here. From Russell, we only use regen. Would you need to look at change suggestions instead of new suggestions? It's the only way. Okay.
Oh, wait, change suggestions said, yes, you do. I'm sorry.
And the rest of the
Yes.
statement is it's the only way to include PO contracts.
So regen has nothing to do with change suggestions. I mean that whether it's regen or net change suggestions is due to the fact that you have a current PO or a current job that's scheduled for a different time than you really need it. So let's say that MRP initially told you to have a job and it's scheduled to be done September 1st. And then sales changes the sales order date to August 15th. MRP will look at that and sees that there is a change when you do your regen, and it will go, wow, sales order needs it the 15th, the job scheduled for the 1st of September, and it will do a change suggestion on you to say you need to fix that.
Okay.
And the same thing with quantity. If somebody changes the quantity or reduces the quantity of the order said was originally for 100, now they only want 50, it'll tell you to reduce the quantity of the job or the PO. And the only way you see that is with change suggestions. The new suggestions are only the items that are new things you need to buy or new things you need to make.
And Russell, I unmuted you if you need to ask any follow on to that. You just have to unmute yourself if you've got anything else on that.
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay, cool. From James Gaffney, how often would one typically run global reschedule? Most of our operations are finitely scheduled, and is there an easy way to test what global reschedule would do to your schedule without actually doing it?
Yes. So global rescheduling, I'm trying to remember, I'm going into it just to make sure that I'm saying it correctly. So in global rescheduling, there is an option, there's a checkbox that says, what if schedule only? And so inside of Epicor, there are two schedules actually maintained. There is the schedule, and there is also the what if schedule. And you can run the what if schedule, and it will reschedule everything using the what if schedule. And then there's some comparisons where you can say, show me the what if versus the real. In fact, the job scheduling board will show you both. You can see it's got two colors, and one of them's the what if color and one of them's the real color. So you can see the net effect of the what if. And there's a report. I don't remember what it's called. I don't use this very often. There's a schedule impact report that you can see the schedule impact of your change.
And James, you're unmuted if you want to ask any follow on to that.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got, I don't know, 300 or 400 jobs in our schedule. So I've been afraid to try that. But one of the problems I end up with is, like you were saying, some jobs will fall behind and they kind of stay behind, right? And then we scramble and reschedule that and then throw other things out. And it feels like we're almost using the schedule like an Excel spreadsheet, moving stuff around by hand. Feels like global scheduling may help solve that, but I'm afraid it's going to cause other problems, which is why we've chickened out and not done it.
Yeah, so you should be able to run these the what if version and then run the schedule impact report. And there's all sorts of checkboxes on that schedule impact report that says, show me the jobs that are now early, show me the jobs that are less early, that are now late, so it shows you what has happened when you run this based off of the what if. And there is also an option to accept the what if schedule. You can do that in the job scheduling board, for example. You can go pull up the job and go, okay, yeah, I want to do that. And you say, accept this schedule, and it will turn the what if schedule into the real schedule.
Perfect, because I'm like you, I like my schedule to be correct. And when it gets incorrect, production tends to then say, wow, it's wrong anyway, and they kind of cowboy it and write and do what they want.
Yeah, I can do anything I want because nothing's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Brandon Nicholson, if we don't reschedule the past due job, does that screw the shop load report even in an infinite scheduling scenario?
Yeah, because the shop load report does show past due infinite work. So
Brandon,
it shows that yesterday you had work scheduled that isn't done. It's not screwed up. It's just you've got 40 hours of work that's past due, and you've got and today you've got 8 hours of work to do. You tell me.
I just wanted to see if it would be putting that time on a previous date, or if it moves it to the current date if it wasn't done.
Only if you reschedule it. If you don't reschedule it, it just leaves it in this past due bucket that's sitting in there on the overload informer.
Okay. So essentially, it doesn't show you the exact load for that day then unless you reschedule.
No.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because in order to do that, it would have to push everything out. So everything gets to flutter out one day. If the machine was shut down for one day, and this is the simple scenario. Yesterday, the machine was shut down. So therefore, everything that was supposed to be done yesterday is now going to be done today. That means everything that was going to be done today gets pushed to tomorrow, and so on and so forth until it refloats everything. You can make up for that by saying, oh, we're going to work Saturday. And then at that point, your refloating is resolved. But if you're not going to add any extra capacity, it's just going to keep on pushing it out until it finds an open window.
Thank you.
all right. And from Brad Ducharme again, why when adjusting global scheduling order, okay, let me try and reread this, sorry. Why when adjusting global scheduling order, when you set an item at 10, a 2000 item schedules before the 10 order that was set?
So the global scheduling, excuse me, the global scheduling order is supposed to use that scheduling order. It's supposed to, but that does not mean that a 10 will get scheduled in front of an item that has a 2000 on it. The reason is because how do I put this? The system uses the scheduling order to determine which orders get put into the schedule first. So what it's supposed to be doing, and what I've seen it do, is it first wipes out the calendar. So it goes into your Outlook calendar, it takes all your appointments off of it, and then it goes, okay, who gets to reserve my calendar first? Oh, my boss does. So I take my boss's appointments and I put them on the calendar first. And then it goes to the next one. It goes, okay, then here's the next one, and I put those in, and I go, oh no, there's a conflict there. Therefore, they can't do it because my boss already has that day reserved. If you do it, what happens with without the global scheduling is the jobs that consume the schedule are the first ones that consume it, whether they're important or not. And so that's where this gets, where it gets complicated is that priority or that number 10 job, if it's not scheduled to start for 3 months, then it gets scheduled for 3 months out. It doesn't mean it's going to get scheduled for today. It just means it's going to be the first one that gets to reserved dates. And then the job number 11 is the next one that gets to reserve dates. But they're only going to reserve the dates that they need and according to their schedule. Now, if you're what you're telling me is that it was supposed to consume today's date, but it didn't, because a job that's a scheduled priority of, or not a scheduled priority, but a scheduling sequence of 2000 got scheduled in front of it, that concerns me. But maybe that one was locked, or I don't know.
Brad, I know you said you didn't have a microphone, but if you've got anything else to add, just type it into the questions there, and we'll try and get to you. Excuse me. And if anybody else has any other questions, I think that gets us through our list. Surprisingly. Woohoo! Oh, Christine's got one.
Yeah, I just can't type it in. So we have a lot of manuals and, part manuals and work instructions and things in our bill of material. And one thing that would be really nice, and I don't know if this, maybe it's probably a feature request. I just want to hear if anybody has similar situation. So every time MRP runs, all of these has to be included. Well, you have to include them when they're in the bill of material. So we would like to have a part type, if it's possible, part type that's something other than purchased, manufactured, and sales kit. So we could exclude some of these parts from taking up time in MRP to run.
How about just checking the box that says don't run MRP on this part?
Well, the problem is that we also would like to have them on the job travelers.
I didn't say it. It still will show up on the job traveler.
Yeah.
There's a checkbox that says, do you want to run MRP and do you want purchasing run on this part? It's at the site level. That's option one. That's piece one. But there's also piece number two, which is there's a checkbox that says, is this a quantity bearing part? And if you uncheck the quantity bearing, the system will never tell you to issue the part. You can list it on the bill of material all day long. MRP will ignore it. It doesn't have any cost. Well, you can, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. You can have cost on a non-quantity bearing part. Now, this is different from non-stock. It's non-quantity bearing, which means it doesn't have any. It's not going to tell you to issue them, although you can issue it. But it doesn't tell you to buy them. It doesn't show up on MRP to buy more because it's just a document.
Okay.
That's what it's for.
With the 10,000 parts running every night, it feels.
No, so if you uncheck quantity bearing, and also, by the way, you have to uncheck it at the part level, and there's also one at the site level also. Yes. So the quantity bearing flag is in both places. So it can be quantity bearing in one and not quantity bearing in the other, but you mark it as, wait a minute, yeah, there it is, quantity bearing. So you uncheck the quantity bearing at the site level. It basically, it turns off MRP also. Or does it? Now I'm looking at it. I just did it and I didn't do it. Do I want to?
I'm not so sure. And the other part of that question is that I think there's a new field that's in the part that's called virtual. It's just a checkbox. And I don't know. Yeah,
don't know anything about that.
I don't think it's a customization.
That's our custom field.
Maybe it's a UD field that we put in. I should be careful saying that.
Yeah, that's a custom field we put in.
That's a custom field. Never mind.
Flag
we just want to have ways to, we want to have ways to identify a lot of these virtual parts or non.
So here's what I have done for one customer is that we did create a part class called documentation. And whenever you chose that part class, it also automatically unchecked the quantity bearing with a BPM because it was documentation. And now we don't. And the other thing about not quantity bearing is it also doesn't tell you to do physical inventory of it. And this particular customer originally had back flushing turned on. So what was happening was that every time they manufactured one of these parts, it back flushed one of these documents, driving it negative. And so you had all this negative on hand of documentation that they didn't really have.
Mhm.
So now when you go to do your physical inventory or your cycle counts, it's always telling you to go correct the count. When we went in and we found all the documentation, we turned off the quantity bearing flag, we cleaned it all up, and now physical inventory ignores documentation because they're all non-quantity bearing parts.
Yep, we'll take a look at that.
I think I solved your problem.
I hope so. That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Mike has a follow on to that. Not issuing a part messes with autocomplete. What was your first suggestion?
Well, non-quantity bearing is the way to do it. Now, if autocomplete doesn't resolve to that, the other option is you can also say that it takes 0 quantity as of Epicor 10. You can put in your bill of material, you can reference the part, but also say it's 0 quantity on the bill. So then it automatically looks like it's been issued complete.
And Mike, I unmuted you if you want to have a follow on there.
Guess not.
Okay, we'll say that that's all good.
That was a missing feature in Epicor for years, is that you could not say 0 quantity on a bill of material, and we complained about it over and over again. And we finally got it added in Epicor 10, so that you can.
Mike, I found the mute button. That sounds like a great suggestion.
So yeah, you can just basically say it's 0 quantity, and now it looks like it's been fully issued because your required quantity was 0 and you've issued 0.
Can you tell Agile PLM to do the same thing?
Yeah. It doesn't have 0 quantity on Agile PLM?
No, unfortunately.
And Tamara says they use 0 quantity and it works well. So excellent. Anyone else have any questions? If you do, put them into the question area and we will get to them. Otherwise, I'd like to thank all our presenters for hanging out, especially for the Q&A at the end here. I know it takes up a bit of time. So thank you much. Thank you to everybody that's attended. And as soon as we can, we'll get the minutes out with the recordings and we'll get those posted. As you've seen from the past few meetings, it takes me a little bit to get everything converted and posted. So kind of bear with me. I try to get it in there as quickly as I can, but it takes a little bit some days. Not seeing any new questions. I'll hang out for just a little bit, just in case somebody does have something else. Otherwise, I will see everybody in November for the next meeting. And again, that one will be virtual as well. Please fill out your surveys when you leave. Like I said, I think they show up at the end of the meeting. Otherwise, they'll get emailed out. That does give us ideas for what you want to see at the next meeting and how we can improve the meetings in general. So thank you, everyone, and have a great time. Talk to you all later.
Thank you all.